Hello, warm greetings from the Academy of Korean Studies. I'm Claire Kim, your MC for today's Societas lecture Zoom meeting. Since COVID-19 pandemic started, the Societas Koreana has still tried to offer meaningful lectures to deepen the understanding of Korean studies through specially made lecture videos and interviews which are uploaded on YouTube. Especially for this year's Societas Koreana lecture meeting, we have prepared a Zoom lecture meeting which enables us to invite the attendees through a web conference. I'd like to welcome all of you and appreciate your participation and presence. Okay, before we start, I have an announcement to confirm your participation while attending the Zoom meeting. Please rename your ID as name/affiliation in English. Thank you. Now let us start. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to welcome and introduce Professor Booyuel Kim, Associate Professor from the Graduate School of Environmental Studies at Seoul National University, and the title of his lecture is Impacts of AI-Backed Adaptive Learning on Students' Math Performance, Evidence from Vietnam. Let me take a moment to introduce Professor Kim briefly. He achieved his doctoral degree at Columbia University for Sustainable Development in 2014 and worked as Associate Professor of KDI School of Public Policy and Management from 2019. And from the last year, he joined Seoul National University's graduate school. He has been studying and publishing many papers and journals regarding development issues from very diverse perspectives. No further delay, please join me in welcoming Professor Kim to the stage.
Thank you very much for having me here, the 88th Societas Koreana lecture meeting. I'm very happy to meet you all. Today, I'm briefly talk about my field research in Vietnam. So the title of the talk today is Impact of AI-Backed Adaptive Learning on Students' Math Performance, Evidence from Vietnam. I'm an associate professor at Graduate School of Environmental Studies at Seoul National University, and my major is development economics and sustainable development. So I've been working in many developing countries so far. For example, Malawi, Ghana, Ethiopia in sub-Saharan African country, as well as Southeast Asian countries such as Vietnam, Cambodia, and Myanmar. Today, I'm going to share some of my experience about education project. So this could be related to the recent education policy, how we can improve the education learning. Okay. So at the beginning of the new millennium in 2000, the world leaders gathered at the United Nations to shape a broader vision to fight poverty in its many dimensions. And that vision was translated into 8 Millennium Development Goals, which had remained the overarching development framework for the world for the past 15 years between year 2000 to 2015. And after the Millennium Development Goal, 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, adopted by the all UN member states in 2015, provide a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for people and the planet, now and into the future. And there are 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which are an urgent call for action by our country, both developed and developing country, in a global partnership. So from year 2000 to 15, we work for Millennium Development Goal. There are 8 Millennium Development Goals. After that, now we are pursuing for 17 Sustainable Development Goal. So this is Millennium Development Goal. There are 8 Millennium Development Goals, and among them, MDG number 2, achieving universal primary education, is related to educational goal. The other goal, reducing extreme poverty and hunger, and number 3, to promote gender equality. Number 4, to reduce child mortality. Number 5, improve maternal health. Number 6, to combat HIV, malaria, and other infectious disease. Number 7, to ensure environmental sustainability. And number 8, global partnership for development. And all of these goals are very important, but today I'd like to stay focused on the education goal, MDG number 2. So the MDG number 2 is basically target the universal primary education. So the target index is the net primary school enrollment rate. And when the MDG was issued and proclaimed, the primary school net enrollment in 2000 was 83%. But because of this Millennium Development Goals and MDG initiative, these primary school net enrollment increased up to 91%. And the number of out-of-school children of primary school age worldwide has fallen by almost half to an estimated 57 million in 2015, which was down from 100 million in 2000. And if we're looking at the sub-Saharan African country, they achieve a 20 percentage point increase, huge increase in the net enrollment rate from year 2000 to 2015, which is the MDG period. If you compare to their very minimal gain of only 8% point increase between year 1990 to 2000. So about MDG number 2, we want to achieve the universal primary education. Basically, let's send our children to at least primary school. That was the MDG number 2. Many of the participants, your country already achieved the primary education, the universal primary education. In South Korea, after the Korean War in 1950s, we achieved the universal primary education in late 1950. So maybe you feel like, oh, MDG 2 is not relevant to our context and our situation. But that was our starting point. So in MDG number 2, we target 100% primary school net enrollment. Yes, we achieve significant improvement, now 91%, but again, the goal was universal primary education, which means we want to target 100%. So many of country has failed to achieve MDG number 2, despite this huge progress. So this is the MDG number 2. And after year 2015, the Sustainable Development Goal, there are 17 Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs are adopted. So this is post-2015 development agenda. Number 1, no poverty. Number 2, zero hunger. Number 3, health. Number 4, quality education. Now you see that in SDGs, SDG number 4 is related to educational goal, right? So just let me examine SDG number 4 in detail. So if you look at the SDG number 4, there are a couple of targets. The target 1 is to ensure by year 2030 that all girls and boys complete free, equitable, and quality primary and secondary education, leading to relevant and effective learning outcome. Target 2 is to ensure that all girls and boys have an access to quality early child development, care, and pre-primary education so that they are ready for primary education. So basically, you can see 2 notable differences between MDG number 2 and SDG number 4. First, MDG number 2, it only targets primary education, the basics of the basics in education, right? But in SDG, the scope of education has been expanded. Now it covers not only primary education, but also the secondary education as well, right? And also, it covers down to pre-primary education, early child development education as well. So SDG number 4, the scope has been expanded from early child development to primary education to secondary education. But another big difference is that here, if you look at the SDG number 4 title, here, title is quality education. This is a big difference between MDG 2 and SDG 4. So just let me explain the situation. So this picture was taken from rural Malawi, where I was working in year 2010 to 2016. And this is a typical rural primary school situation in Malawi, right? And you see the picture, and many primary school age children are at school, but you see that there is no tables and no chairs, and many of students do not have the textbooks. And you may see the lady here, lady here, in a red clothing. She was a teacher. And in many studies in developing country, like pointed out that more than 30 to 40% of teachers, they are absent. So teacher absenteeism is a huge problem. But when we took this picture, the children were lucky enough to have their teacher at home. Even though the teachers were present in the classroom, you see that the next picture. The teacher's qualification is another issue in developing country. Now, she tried to teach how to do fractions. And one example is 2 over 5 times 2. What is the correct answer? Correct answer should be 4 over 5, right? But the way she taught is that 2 over 5 times 2 suddenly become 2 over 5 times 2 over 2. So it's going to be 4 over 10. It's completely wrong, isn't it? In the second example, 1 over 7 times 3, the correct answer should be 3 over 7, right? But the way she taught is completely wrong, and she just provided a wrong answer, 3 over 21. At least she was consistently wrong, but teacher absenteeism is a problem, and the teacher qualification is a problem. And you see the school environment, how we can guarantee the quality education. Actually, students are learning. So here in SDG number 4, the scope has been expanded to primary to secondary, primary down to pre-primary. Yeah, it's much bigger, but it's going to be much deeper. Now we address the quality issue, quality education. But many of the developing countries face many challenges. And despite these huge challenges, how we can guarantee the quality education, how are we going to make sure that children are learning something from the classroom? That's a big challenges. So compared to SDG number 4, MDG number 2, the achieving primary education, is more like a quantity-oriented goal. Why? Because even in this situation, as long as students are at school, we are achieving primary education, universal primary education. Let's assume that there are like 100 the primary school age children in your country, and all of them are at school like this. Then MDG number 2, we say that, oh, we achieve MDG number 2. Because it's a quantity-oriented goal, then we never address the quality issue, learning issue. But now we are addressing SDG number 4, quality education. So the dimension has been completely changed. So there are many initiatives and research how we can guarantee the quality education. And there are many, but one of them is to look up some of the possibility of using artificial intelligence, educational technology. So the Education Commission, chaired by the former UK Prime Minister Gordon Brown and many of the world leaders in education, they worked with the Vienna Ministry of Education and Training, and they implemented the high-touch, high-tech prototype project in Vienna. Just let me explain what is high-touch, high-tech project. So their basic idea is that we can think of the levels of learning. So the bottom layers of learning, just remember some concept. And once you remember some formulas and concept, then now you can understand the concept, right? So these remember key concept or formula and understand them is the bottom layer of the learning pyramid. And then once you remember and understand the core concept, then more higher level of learning is like you can apply, or you can analyze, or you can evaluate. Further, later you can create something new, right? So the high-touch, high-tech basic idea is that let the AI, the artificial intelligence, take care of the bottom pyramid of learning. So that's the remember and understand. And then while let the AI like take care of the bottom pyramid, the real teacher, human teachers, focusing on a more higher level of learning. That's apply, analyze, and create. So that's the basic idea. And the AI is much more efficient to assess students' learning progress. So that, for example, the 7th grade students, and like one example is that in Kenya context, the researcher found out that many of the primary school students, they didn't have the textbook. So they provide a textbook, and 1 year later, they evaluate the impact of providing textbook on the test score. And surprisingly, they didn't find any impact. And they analyzed the reason why. The reason why there is no impact of providing textbook is because many of 7th grade students, 6th grade students, they didn't know how to do 1, 2, 3. They didn't know how to do the basic like numeracy and literacy. So like they don't know the very core concept of the 1st grade and 2nd grade they should have known. Then what is so effective to provide a 7th grade textbook? Because they don't understand at all, right? So here, but in a real classroom, each teacher, for example, in developing country, they have like 50s and 60 students in one classroom, and it's very difficult to figure out whether one student, the student A, has the progress, and the student B do not know the core concept of the 4th grade or 5th grade. But the AI, this AI, artificial intelligence technology, very efficiently figured out the students' current learning progress. And then it customized the learning contents to each student. So this high-tech, the artificial intelligence part can be very effective to deliver this bottom pyramid of learning, the remember and understand the core concept. So what we did is that in 2019, September, we worked with the 4 middle schools in Vietnam. And from 4 schools, the 531 7th grade students participated in this high-touch, high-tech prototype project for 1 semester. And instead of teaching 7th grade math course with the conventional teacher, we provide the Alex system. This Alex system is developed by the McGraw-Hill company, and they are one of the leaders in this artificial intelligent adaptive learning system. So these students learned their math curriculum not from their teacher, but from this Alex AI system. And while they are studying their core concepts, the teachers facilitate their learnings in the classroom. And here, so the Vienna Ministry of Education, the UK aid agencies, and the ADB Asian Development Bank and KDI School of Public Policy, they all work together to implement this prototype project. So we really want to rigorously evaluate this prototype project. So our strategy is to match the comparison school first. So we had 4 treatment schools, 2 in Hanoi and 2 schools in Ho Chi Minh City. And we recruited very compatible 3 schools, and they are matched together. So from the beginning, we have, again, 531 students from 4 treatment schools, and we have 832 students from the comparison schools. That was our starting point. And then our evaluation strategy is to compare before and after change of treatment school to before and after change to the comparison school. So that's our basic idea. I'm not going to explain in technical terms, but the basic idea is that without the comparison school, you might say that the impact of this education project is going to be A plus B. But actually, the progress about B is a natural trend. So even without this prototype project, anyway, as a natural trend, student will progress. So this, our identification strategy, having a comparison school, try to decompose this B part. So we only looking for A, not A plus B. That's a basic idea. So we compare first before and after changes in comparison school to before and after changes in treatment school. So that's our strategy called difference and difference. Why? First difference is before and after. Second difference is treatment school and comparison school. So that's our strategy. And let me first look at our baseline before status. Ideally, the treatment school and comparison school should be very comparable to each other in many of predetermined characteristics. That's the ideal situation. Why? Why is it important? If the treatment school and comparison schools are very similar in many of the characteristics, then the only difference is going to be the treatment itself, the one semester AI adaptive learning. Then we can confidently say that this is because of this Alex AI adaptive learning system that the students' math progress, math test score improved. But if the characteristics between treatment and comparison schools are different, then that's a negative, that's a minus. But if you look at the baseline characteristics between treatment schools and comparison school, we did our best to find out a very compatible schools. But as you see, the students' fathers, mothers' education in treatment school is much higher than the comparison school. And also, if you're looking at the baseline test score before we implementing the ALEX system, you see that the treatment school students' test score is higher than, slightly higher than the comparison school. So the test score number is 21.6, and the comparison score is 20.2, right? So this is our limitation of our evaluation. However, we just admitted that this is our situation, and then from this point, we want to compare the before and after changes of treatment school and before and after changes of comparison school. Okay, and shall we look at the result? Here, students have to solve the total 34 questions. So the math test comprised of the 34 questions. And if you look at the column 1, 2, 3, and the first row, treatment times post, that means that if you are studying in a treatment school, so basically you are learning math from Alex AI adaptive learning system, then you are getting 2.5 questionnaire more. You get more 2.5 question more, right? And if I translate these 2.5 question more impact into the standardization, then the treatment effect size is 0.4. If you're not a researcher in education, then what is like 0.4 standard deviation? What is the magnitude? Is it big or is it small? You maybe have not an idea, but in education, we usually say that if you have a 0.2 standard deviation impact, that's a significant impact. So in this case, the student who study their math with AI adaptive learning system, ALEX, their test score improved by 0.4 standard deviation, which is huge. So this is like more than 1 year learning. They only learning this math course for one semester, but their impact is like more than 1 year of learning. So this is a very big learning outcome. So we are very happy to see that the studying math with AI adaptive learning system works really well. And the next question is that the basic idea is that why this ALEX system, adaptive learning system, is efficient is because assume that you are 7th grade students. And then those high-performing kids, they are all okay because they all understand the previous concept, 6th grade concept, 5th grade concept, 4th grade concept. But if you are a low-performing student, and there are thousands of reasons why you are not doing well math in 7th grade. Because you do not remember the 6th grade core concept, maybe you don't have fully understand the key calculation or key concept in the 3rd grade or 4th grade. But in an actual classroom, it is almost impossible for a teacher to address that issue for the low-performing student because there are so many kids in a test, and it's very difficult to assess that kid's problem. But AI can very efficiently figure out that student's problem. And then, when Alex assessed the student's progress, and they just infer that, the reason why these kids are having some issues in this question is because he or she need to review the concept from 5th grade or 6th grade. So in order to test these adaptive learning features, we comprise the 16 math question. So 4 questions for 7th grade, their current grade, and another 4 questions for the 1 year previous, the 6th grade question, and another 4 for 5th grade question, the last 4 questions for the 4th grade question. So when we examine the impact of the adaptive learning system per each grade, we find out that the treatment effect mainly comes from the previous grade question. So you see that the students' improvement in math test score mainly comes from the previous grade question, 6th grade question and 5th grade question, which shows that this adaptive learning systems works really well. And we can think about another aspect. What about if you are a really high-performing student, then it's very unlikely that you fail to understand the previous concept, the 4th grade and 5th grade. It's too easy for you. So maybe the impact of this adaptive learning system may be a little bit smaller for high-achieving students. But if you are really low-performing student in math, and very likely to be ignored in a real classroom because so many children, so many students there, and teacher, it's very difficult to figure out your problem. However, these low-performing students, if you are learning with this customized individual AI adaptive learning system, then you have a chance to review your weakness in the 3rd grade concepts and 4th grade example questions. So we may expect that, maybe the impact of the adaptive learning system could be much larger for low-performing students. So the next analysis addressed that point. So we divide a student by the baseline math test score. So before we implemented this ALEX adaptive learning system, we measure the student's math test score at the baseline. And we have quartile so that the bottom 25% and 25 to 50% and 50 to 75% and top 25%. So we have 4 subgroups. And if you look at the impact size, you see that the bottom 25% student who really lag behind in math, their impact size is 0.8 standard deviation. While if you're looking at the impact size for the top 25%, it's 0.17 standard deviation. So it's like 5 times bigger. The impact size is 5 times bigger for the bottom 25% student, the low-performing student. That's huge. Like 0.8 standard deviation effect size is like for example, in Afghanistan, there is no primary school in a rural area. so that the U.S. aid agency constructed the new community primary school. Then when you construct a new school in the nowhere in a rural area, then expected the effect size would be like 0.7 standard deviation or 0.8 standard deviation. So this 0.8 standard deviation effect size is comparable to constructing a new school. So that's a huge effect size. So we see that this adaptive learning is very, very effective, especially for low-performing students, because this AI adaptive system can effectively and efficiently address their weakness and problem. And our result is consistent with the previous literature conducted in India. So in India, there is also a very famous AI adaptive learning system, MindSpark. And this research group, the Muledran, Singh, and Gaminian, they examine the impact of MindSpark in Hindi and maths. And they find also the very similar result to ours, that their impact side is huge, and this impact is concentrated on the low-performing student, right? So just let me let me cover some limitations of our study. So it's a very small sample study because it's a prototype project. So Vietnamese Ministry of Education wants to implement this small-scale prototype project, and after reviewing the results, they are going to decide whether they are scale up this project into the nationwide in Vietnam or not. So our main limitation is that it's a very small sample study. We only have 4 schools and 3 comparison schools. And the second issue is that we have some internal validity issue. What is internal validity? We are not quite 100% sure that it is because of our adaptive learning system. Why? Because from the beginning, our treatment schools and comparison school have a different characteristics. So our matching process was not perfect. So that was our main limitation. The third, we also have some external validity issue. What is external validity? Once you have some result in this small-scale project, can we generalize this result into another context? So when we work with this prototype project, we first work with the elite middle school in Vienna, because we didn't have enough time to translate all the material in Alex, which was written in English, into Vietnamese language. So we work with the 4 elite middle school, where these 7th grade Vietnamese students are so smart. They come from very well, rich, and high socioeconomic status family background, and they all know how to. They can learn their math in English. So we work with the elite school. So we are not quite sure whether the same effect will appear when we provide the same contents to the typical rural middle school in Vienna. And another limitation of the study is that we didn't fully examine the black box. The 531 treated students, actually we have learning data in an Alexis system, but we didn't look at the black box. So that was another main limitation. And finally, the project name is High Touch and High Tech. So basically we focusing on analyzing the high tech part, whether this Alex system is efficiently improved the students' the math score. But we didn't fully examine the high touch part, how teacher affect the students' the learnings, and what was the teacher's role. Because since we are working with only small school number, so we didn't have enough teacher number here. So that was another main limitation of our research. But so let me conclude. Despite many limitations of this evaluation study for high touch, high tech prototype project in Vienna, we found out that this AI adaptive learning system could be very effective for students' learning, especially in math. And what we found out that this AI adaptive learning is more efficient for low-performing students because it can customize each student's learning needs and demands. And finally, because of this evaluation study, we contributed to the scale-up project for the high-touch high-tech in Vienna. We are very happy to hear that Vietnamese Ministry of Education decided to scale up this project into more large number of middle schools in Vienna. And also, Indonesian Ministry of Education, they also decide to adopt this strategy. So we are very happy to see that the prototype research contributed to the scale-up project in Vietnam, as well as the better research design for high-touch, high-tech project in Indonesia. So just let me stop here, and if you have any questions, and just let me answer your question. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much for your informative and valuable lessons for all of us, Professor. And now I'd like to open a question and answer session. If you have any questions, you can speak up for yourself and ask about your intriguing questions to professors by yourself, or also you can type your questions in chatting box.
Thank you. I have a comment from James Kim. Thank you for your lectures and sharing project. How do you see the education disparity in developing country, especially under pandemic situation? Do you think it's getting bigger among students according to their parents' income level? That's a really good comment. Not only in developing country, but also in developed country, we see huge educational learning disparity, especially in the era of COVID-19 pandemic. So that's a really serious issue. For example, in Korea last year, all schools were closed down. Then what happened? Like high-income family students, they can go to the private academic institutions, or they can have a private tutorings, and they have the other material to study. But the low-income family kids, they are completely ignored. So they didn't have enough resources to study further, except the school setting. When the school completely closed down, then those low-income family children are the most affected. So that's not only issue for the developing country. It's issue for the United States, issue for the Republic of Korea. So I'm really concerned about this educational inequality. And this educational inequality has been much enlarged because of COVID-19 situation. For example, this AI adaptive learning system, in many of Korean edutech companies invested a lot in this adaptive learning system. And if you wanna subscribe to this AI adaptive learning system, its monthly subscription fee is like $100. And then many of rich family kids, they can study with their AI teacher, AI tutors, and they can go to private tutors and private institution, while the low income family kids, they are doing nothing, right? Because schools closed down. Then it's so natural, and it's very much expected that we're going to see the big educational inequality in the years to come. So I think the James Kim's comment is a very important key policy area which we have to address in the era of COVID-19 and in the post-COVID-19 situation.
I think so. And next question will be reading by me instead of all of us. From Mr. Olga, thank you for your lecture. Isn't providing AI technologies massively at this time to underdeveloped regions more expensive than textbooks and teachers? Can you please demonstrate some examples of AI performance?
Yes. For example, let's assume the rural primary school in Malawi. Here, you saw the picture I show you, right? And then basically there is no computer lab. So maybe instead of providing this Alex system in a laptop computer, maybe we need to provide a tablet PC to each children. So the education infrastructure can be the great constraint. You may think that this providing AI technology may be expensive, But nowadays, this like cost of this adaptive learning system, it's getting much cheaper and cheaper. So I'm not quite sure which one is more expensive, providing the AI technology or constructing a new schools and providing a textbooks. Maybe there may be not big difference. But my point is that providing AI technology alone is not going to work. So that's why the Education Commission emphasized the high touch from the teacher with high tech from the EdTech AI adaptive learning system. So without teacher support and facilitation, student never, I'm almost sure, the many of students will never adopt the AI adaptive learning system. So the teacher's role is very important, and we cannot imagine the situation that we provide the AI technology alone be provided. It's not going to work. So we need to design the education policy to combine the AI adaptive learning system technology with the teacher, right? So the teacher's role cannot be emphasized more, right? Thank you.
All right. Oh, at least we have one good news. The AI technology is getting cheaper and cheaper. So I expect many more government agencies and many companies, firms can contribute to make our world much more better for school kids, especially. All right, we are going to move to a nice question. Thank you for such an interesting presentation. The potential impact of AI in contributing to improve access to quality education is clear, but what is the forecast for these technologies in countries where access to technology and rapid internet is limited? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yes, but many of the AI adaptive technology sometimes doesn't require the internet connection. So yes, this internet connection and the very basic hardware infrastructure is very important, but maybe we can creatively overcome the given situation. I fully understand the developing country situation. Maybe you don't have like electricity access or like setting aside the internet access issue. But like we can creatively overcome this issue. Like instead of like implementing this AI adaptive learning system in a laptop or the desktop computer, maybe many of the programs are working in a tablet PC. And sometimes if you don't have the internet access, still it's working. So, yes, but like thinking about it, like. Our goal is to provide a quality education. Then, in order to provide a quality education, then the basic thing is that the teacher qualification has been improved, right? And then, which one do you think that is more efficient and easier? Now, you completely work on the entire workforce of teacher in your country and upgrade their qualification. Or you integrate this AI technology into the teacher's education, so the teacher utilized this AI adaptive learning. So instead of individual teacher like correctly understand the whole curriculums and assess the students like learning progress and apply the customized learning concept, it's more like a huge challenge, isn't it? So I think yes, like physical constraints, the lack of internet access, like infrastructure can be a challenge, but also the conventional challenges like reinventing and re-overhaul the conventional teacher workforce may be more like a more demanding and more challenging work. So yes, it's a challenges and it's a problem, but like providing tablet PCs and other issues, we can overcome this technical issue as well. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. We're going to move to Mr. Munira's questions. Thank you for a very productive and relevant lecture. What do you think how it possible to raise the level of education in developing countries? Very broad question though.
The key concept is how we can assess the individual students like a learning progress, right? And in a typical primary school in Kenya or Malawi, in a low-income country in sub-Saharan African country, there are 50 kids, up to 100 kids in a one single classroom. And then one teacher, let's assume that there are 50 kids. Then what is the efficient way for a teacher to target student? Like if the teacher target the high-performing students, and then the rest of the kids feel like, oh, it's too difficult for me, right? And if teacher target the bottom student, then what happened? Then many of the top performing students feel like, oh, that's boring. I already know that concept. So teacher has a very difficult challenges that how we can target. Setting aside the teacher provide the correct answer. I showed the picture that some teacher, they have very low level of understanding in math and their qualification is really low. That's another problem. But assuming that teacher is okay, their qualification is okay. But with 50s and 100 kids in a single classroom, targeting individual students' demands and needs is almost impossible. So here, this AI adaptive learning system has a huge potential to customize each and every student's needs. So if the students is high-performing students in 7th grade, then AI adaptive learning system can facilitate the student, or you can study the next level question, like 8th grade and 9th grade. So it's not going to be boring. And if the low-performing student, oh, it's okay, you are 7th grade, but in a typical classroom, these children are just left behind. They cannot, the teacher cannot address and take care of these children because he or she has to teach the 7th grade material. But actually what actually needs for these kids is that you have to learn the basic numeracy and basic literacy. But the AI adaptive learning system can figure out that, oh, even though these kids are 7th grade, now let's start the 1st grade core concept. Don't be embarrassed. It's okay. Nobody see your progress. It's between you and AI teacher. So that in a single classroom, the AI adaptive learning then efficiently customize the learning curriculum to each children. So I think in this situation, no student left behind. So that I think because of this technology, here we can improve the general level of education, the quality education. Yeah.
All right, that could be the answer, one of the answers from Solongo's questions, but I will read. Mr. Solongo asks, what makes Alex effective so that it improves the learning ability of students better compared to other considerable AI learning systems?
That's a good question, yes. And I'm not a AI engineer, so that I'm not in a position to evaluate which AI learning system is better. I only know that the McGraw-Hill is a leading company in this adaptive learning system, but there are many other competing really good AI adaptive learning system. And another thing is that here, this Alex system, you have to pay for this system. But for example, you may heard about Khan Academy. This is a free of charge. And they recently actively adopt this AI adaptive learning component in their math curriculum. So if you go to the Khan Academy, and then you can freely use their adaptive learning math courses curriculum content. So yes, there are many providers. And as a policymaker, you may consider which AI adaptive learning platforms or system is efficient better. But I think that's the future research area. But that's a good question. And also, there's a leading company and they charge the fee for this AI adaptive learning. And then maybe this kind of charging fee, it's not inexpensive. In South Korea, you have to pay $100 for subscribing the service. Then paying $100 is not just a piece of cake. So here, in order to reduce this education inequality, let's assume that this AI adaptive learning system will effectively improve the learning outcome and only high-income family can afford it, then it's crystal clear that the education inequality is getting larger. So how we can make this process equitably accessible by everybody? So That's a policy area, and also there are some movement to develop the AI adaptive learning system content. So the one example is Khan Academy. So that's a good question.
Okay, and Solongo also extended his question. Nowadays, why e-learning has become more effective compared to paper learning? Is not it impacting negatively on brain thinking and development?
Wait a second.
Yes, Solongo. That was from.
So Longo.
Yes,
Okay, thank you. I'm not quite sure whether we have a scientific evidence that this e-learning is better than paper learning. Because you have to control the curriculums and you have to control the school settings and the teacher setting. So it's hard to say that which one is more efficient. But focusing on this like adaptive nature of AI learning system, I think I'm not quite sure whether e-learning is better than the paper learning, as long as, for example, if a teacher like correctly evaluate the students' needs and the current progress and provide the customized learning content in paper, then I think that's going to be very effective, right? So it's not whether e-learning or paper learning, the how we can assess, the how can evaluate the students' current learning progress. I think that's the key point. And there are many interesting research that sometimes like a paper learning and writing a pen in a notebook is much better for students, stimulating their like a learning like learning nodes in their braining. But I don't think we have a conclusive evidence that which the method, e-learning or paper learning, is better than each other. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Professor. Okay, from Miss Olga, I think that experience from teachers working in American ghetto schools can contribute to your research, and there is no need to translate textbooks.
That's a really good comment. So if we think about like MDG number 2, try to achieve universal primary education. This goal is nothing to do with the Republic of Korea because we already achieved the universal primary education like 60 years ago. What about the United States? Like achieving universal primary education, many of the high-income countries, it's nothing to do with the high-income country. It's mainly the low-income country's goal, right? However, when we addressing SDG number 4, quality education, it's related to all of the country. It's related to quality education is important in Malawi, Ghana, Ethiopia, as well as in the United States. What about like schools in slums and like a ghetto schools? Like yeah, they attended the schools, but their learning outcomes is like need to be huge room to be improved, right? So here. In many high-income countries, including South Korea, we really need to address this like a learning, quality learning for like a less advantageous group, very vulnerable group, or the area like a ghetto schools or the slum schools, right? So I think that's the right context to provide this AI adaptive learning system to the susceptible group in a high-income country setting. I think that's the really important area for the further study. Yeah. Okay. I totally agree with your comment.
Okay, so Michaela Boni, she's from Sierra Leone. She asked, "Thanks so much, but does Alex know if you cheat?"
Oh, cheating? Yeah. So that's the another issue. So if that's more like an evaluation system. So, for example, the Arizona State University in the United States has been nominated the most innovative university for the last 4 years. And they just say that we want to be an inclusive university. So they like accept many students, and many of them didn't have enough like the proficiency for math to be an engineer's major student. And then they try to teach these students with the ALEC system. And then like some high performing student, they can finish calculus 1, chemistry, physics, for example, like within like 1 month. But like low performing students, they had a hard time and maybe they are not enough to finish this course, calculus 1 or calculus 2 within 1 semester. Then ASU is very flexible. It's okay. You study with Alex, and then it can be like 2 semesters, it can be 3 semesters. And then until the student complete the whole concept, then the school wait for those students. So like many of students who used to drop out, math course and physics course and basic science course, now they completed these basic science and math courses and they go up to the engineering and science major. So in that case, they didn't evaluate the student like A plus, A minus B. So like their evaluating scheme is like pass and fail, satisfactory or unsatisfactory. So in this evaluation scheme, you don't need to cheat, isn't it? The important thing is that you complete the course, right, with Alex system. So I think that's related to the evaluation scheme. But in the classroom, here, if we just use the conventional a letter grade grading system, A, B, C, D, F, then some cheating issue could be raised. But I think that's the teacher's role to take care of the possible cheating issue. But if we just go for a pass and fail evaluation scheme, then maybe your concern for cheating may be going to be lessened. Thank you.
Okay, let's move to Dr. Apapan's question. Thank you very much for your lecture. It's very nice to join this section. Do you have a plan or interesting for research in other subjects, not only math? What do you think we can apply to other subjects or not? Age and sex of students have effect to research or not? What is a suitable age? Thank you.
I think that's a really good question. And Dr. Apapan suggests the future direction for the research. and here, in the prototype project in Vietnam, we do not see the big difference between boys and girls. But sometimes there is a gender effect. So many of education research find out that this education intervention only works for girls, not boys. But here in our Vietnamese research, we didn't find any gender effect. And which age is suitable for this AI adaptive learning? I think that's a really good comment. Since we're only working with the 7th grade students, we do not know whether it's better to start learning with this AI adaptive learning from 4th grade, the earlier grade, or is it better to learn with this AI adaptive learning when you become a college student or a high school student? We do not know yet. But just my gut feeling is that the earlier the better. But if you can find out that these early age students are more suitable and they are more likely to adopt this new technology and better, and I think that's also it's going to be very interesting policy implication.
Okay.
But still, we do not have enough evidence for your comments. Yeah. Let me just, by the way,
yes.
Other than math course, in MindSpot case in India, they also looking at the Hindi language and math. And many of the adaptive learning system works very well in language and as well as the other science, sometimes in economics and many other disciplines. So math is a good starting point, but we can expand the discipline from math to statistics and languages and other chemistry and physics as well. Yeah.
All right, so we have a limited of time, so I would like to take a last question from Nushin. He said, thank you for your lecture. In countries with very low level of literacy rate, would it be feasible to implement this technical system, or first developing a literacy rate is more important?
I think that's a very important comment. And before we implement this adaptive learning system, the basic foundation should be the basic numeracy and literacy, isn't it? So I totally agree with your concern. But I guess teaching the basic literacy with the AI adaptive learning system could be effective as well. So from that foundation, we can work with this AI adaptive learning to teach the basic numeracy and basic literacy. And so then I think the AI technology also can be very effective before improving the learning outcome, but just having the firm foundation of their learning, that can be the starting point as well. Yeah.
And then this is could be really the last question from Wang Jongsun. Thank you. I wonder about your targets of AI test on education since the AI technology depends on teachers. I ever heard about the social venture. Do you will apply AI technology to developed countries? As you said, AI can improve the education level, but it is very difficult to improve the education quality of a high level.
So the Education Commission, for example, they evaluate the ongoing AI adaptive learning project in Vietnam, in the Indonesian, the developing country, as well as in South Korea, the high-income country. So I think providing the AI adaptive learning system to high-income country and low-income country, I think there's both possibility. And the second question, yeah. So I think my point is that we can apply these AI adaptive learning system not only to developing country but also to developed country. But my guess is that the expected outcome, expected effect size could be much larger from the developing country where the quality education is difficult to ensure. However, many of you already pointed out that in a developing country, low-income country has many the constraints and challenges, like for example, the infrastructure, physical hardwares, and internet access and electricity, etc. But despite these challenges, if we can implement this adaptive learning system in the existing the school system or outside of school system, I think expected gain would be much larger in developing country. And Tazgul also mentioned that I think I totally agree with your comments that he understands that the main goal of adaptive learning is to teach a student, not a class. That's exactly what the adaptive learning system is looking for.
Yes.
It's not like a mass teaching per class. It's an individually customized teaching. So that's exactly the nature of AI adaptive learning system looking for. Yeah, I totally agree with your comment. Yeah.
All right. We have many of us who express their gratitude and their valuable experience to share this lecture for all of us. And I'm very sorry, but we have time to leave it. And this is the end of 88th Societas Korean Lecture Zoom meeting. The next Societas meeting will resume in about a month, September 15th. I really hope that I can meet all of you then. Thank you for your time and passionate attendance. Really thank you. Have a great day. Thank you.
자, 감사합니다. 네.